All right, thanks for joining us today. We are going to take a quick look at ID cards and how they relate to Silver Age for your upcoming ROC events and any other WizKids Silver Age events. We're going to take a look at this in addition to our ID card basics video, so if you haven't checked that out, go ahead and check that out. But this one we're going to get into just a little bit more details. So quickly, taking a look at Thor ID card as the example today. The ID cards do have erratas and some clarifications, so you'll want to check those out. I'll put the link in the description below. But what we're going to cover first is the names on the ID card. So they've been errated where the real name and other identities no longer come into play. So the name on the ID card has to match the name on the character card that you're going to use. So for example, this Thor card has Thor and the real name Thor Odin's son. But it would just be able to be used with characters that match Thor. So for example, this Thor from War of the Realms number 44, that would be okay, the names match. This Thor from War of the Realms number 56 would be okay because the names match. Unworthy Thor from the Mighty Thor, even though it has real name Thor Odin's son, would not be able to be used with this ID card because the names do not match. And even Thor Odin's son from the Mighty Thor also does not match the actual name of the ID card, so you could not use those two together. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The second thing we're going to look at here is the ID cards are unique, which means you couldn't have more than one Thor ID card on your sideline or on your force. On your sideline, you could have multiple versions of Thor that could be used with that card. The way that works is ID cards now read that when you reveal forces, you choose a character on your sideline that matches the name, turn them to a starting click, and then they become the ID character. So you and your opponent sit down, you reveal forces. These two are currently on your sideline, so they are using sideline slots, but maybe you want a range version or a close multi-attack version that does have some range going on as options depending on what's across the table from you. So you reveal forces, you figure out which one works best for the current matchup, and then you choose that one as the ID character. The other one can't really do anything, so it just uses up a sideline slot. But it does give you options if you have room on your sideline, or you want to build where you have options of what you could call in with an ID card. That's one way you can do it. The second thing we're going to look at in today's video is how you can get the ID character off of the map before your opponent's turn. So it's a good strategy to use, especially if you are going to be calling in characters that have a probability of them getting KO'd if you leave them on the map, because you're putting points out there that your opponent might dedicate their entire turn to KO that high point ID character. So a good intermediate strategy is you call out an ID character, let them do their attacks, and then do something so that that ID character goes away before your opponent's turn. So as you remember, on your ID characters, they have the ID character comes onto the map. You have to give a power action to the person calling it in. Then your ID character joins your force. It can do certain things and it cannot do certain things. So what it says here is the ID character cannot be carried, cannot be given double power actions, cannot be replaced, cannot be assigned resources. The ID character returns to your sideline immediately at the beginning of your next turn, or if it's not within 5 squares of the chosen character, the character that called it in, or it's removed from the map by any other game effect, such as being KO'd. For this example, we're going to walk through an example here, a couple examples of how you can get that character to get off the map. So for this example, we have the opponent over here, we are going to be using Venom Magneto and Undertaker. Undertaker is 100 points. They both have the monster keyword, so you could theme up a team around this type of build. Sometimes your call-in character, you want to be a little bit higher points, and that way they give a lot of options of the characters that you can call in. Because remember, your call-in character has to be equal to or less points than the character taking the power action to get them on the map. So Undertaker at 100 points has a wide variety of all the best call-in figures to choose from. If you had a figure that was like 50 points as the one that you want to use to call in as you're designing your team, you're going to be limited on what you can pull onto the map. So having a high point figure that's a little bit tough to KO or to deal with allows you to call out some very strong ID characters, score some points, and then get that character out of there and the ID call-in person out of there. All right, for this example, let's walk through it. So just for frame, we're going to already have people where they need to be. Undertaker could take a power action. He's 100 points, and we could call in. We're going to say that we have the Thor ID card on our sideline. So we can call in 100-point Thor, and he would then go adjacent to Undertaker. This particular Thor has charge of 6, 12 attack, 18 defense, 4 damage. So a pretty hard hitter. What he can do then is he can charge 1, 2, 3 to here. He could even go up to here because then he'll still be within 5 of Undertaker. So we don't want him to have to leave the map before he does his attack. If he was to move 6, he would immediately leave the map. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 to here. Then he could do his attack on the opponent, and whatever happens there happens. Then we don't want to leave that 100 points sitting there for the opponent to be able to tee up on. Of course, this Thor would get an action token for doing an action. But then Venom Magneto, he does a couple different things. He flies. He has TK. He has TK as free. So if he's already in this position, he could just easily TK for free Undertaker. Just even one square. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now they're not within 5 of each other. Thor would immediately leave the map. Okay. On the other side, maybe you want to leave that kind of setup. You can always TK the ID figure 1 square or more away to get them out of there. If you have a flyer, somebody that carries, that has available actions, he could carry Undertaker. He could move 1 square or no squares and then place Undertaker anywhere that's 1 more square away. That would then make Thor leave the map. So carrying TK, if Undertaker had sidestep, that's another common one. So you can call in your figure, take the power action, let your ID figure go to the very edge of how far they need to go, and then sidestep back 1 or 2, and all of a sudden your ID character is off the map. All you've lost is the 5 points for the ID card, and the idea would be that you are KOing more than 5 points on your opponent. So you give up 5 to get more than that. In a tournament event, then you can just, Magneto could carry Undertaker all the way 8 squares away, and then you can just make your opponent try to come to you to score the points that they need. All right, hopefully that made some sense today on how to use the ID cards, the names, how they work together, how you can have multiple versions of ID characters on your sidelines, but not multiple versions of ID of the same ID card on your force, and how to get your calling character off of the map by doing sidestep, carry, TK as some of the options. All right, thanks for watching today. What we're going to do in our next video focusing on ID cards is a little bit more advanced strategy. So we have the basics video, check that out. We have this one, which is a little bit intermediate strategy. Then we're going to cover in the next one how to extend the reach of what you can do with ID cards. And we're going to walk through 1 or 2 team builds, like a core build of what then you can finish a build around using ID cards and strong figures on a themed team. All right, check out those videos. Thanks for watching today. Check it out. If you dig what we do, go ahead and like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.